Hola and aloha, my friends. Welcome back to the Surfer's Library. I'm Billy Jack, your guide through the pages of surf history, culture, and legend. Today we're diving into Chapter 7 of Not Done Yet by the legendary Corky Carroll. If you've been following along, you already know Corky has a way of telling stories that make you feel like you're right there with him in the lineup. This chapter is no different, bringing more laughs, more surf history, and another glimpse into what it was like to grow up during surfing's golden age. So, wherever you're listening from, I'd like to thank you for spending a little time with me. Without further ado, this is Chapter 7 of Not Done Yet. Let's paddle out. Chapter 7. The Summer of the Endless Summer. It's now the spring of 1964, and I am 16 and happily basking in my new job as a pro surfer. I was living in the apartment in Dana Point with a couple of pals, including England-born Australian Rodney Sumter, and enjoying a great romance with the lovely Bonsai Betty. Life is great. Right about this time, local surf movie maker Bruce Brown had just finished his epic film titled The Endless Summer. It's based around a couple of guys who fly around the world chasing perfect surf and what you might consider a for real endless summer. When they were beginning to work on this film, I was told that my name was brought up as possibly being one of the two dudes to make the trip. But I was too young, and it would have been too much trouble with borders, passports, etc., etc., etc. Probably I was just too much of a brat, but hey. One night, Bruce invited the whole local crew over to his house to preview the film and make comments. It was, and still is, an amazing film. I loved it. There was one shot of me in it at Malibu where my board rolled over and I bumped my head on the bottom as it did. When I came up, Mickey Munoz was paddling out, and I was telling him that when my board rolled over, I had hit my head. Bruce Brown, always being one to make something funny and interesting out of nothing, made a joke about it and called it my El Rolo. It was in good humor, and I was just happy to be included in the movie. A month later, the movie was finished and plans were made for an 11-city East Coast premiere tour. Hobie and Bruce had gotten together and arranged a combo surf movie and surfing exhibition trip from New York City to Miami. They had gotten Ford Motor Company to let them use one of their new Ford Condors, the first of the new line of mobile homes that were self-driven, as opposed to house trailers. We affectionately, or not so much, called it the Big Bird. They lined up Joey Cabell, Mike Hinson, myself, plus Phil Edwards and his wife Heidi to make the trip along with them and their wives. 9 of us in all. Bruce held an invitation-only premiere of the movie in Santa Monica in early June, and right after that, we pulled out of Dana Point one midnight, headed across country for New York City. What a crazy trip that was. At first, everybody was all happy and stoked to be doing it, but after a few days and no privacy at all, along with the bathroom overflowing constantly due to Hobie's wife Sharon having to take constant showers, things got a bit tense. I was the only one having fun, but I was also the only one 16 years old and on a great adventure. One night they let Mike Hinson drive and he got us lost. We wound up in some little town in Indiana called Hagerstown. It happened to be the day of the annual Hagerstown Chicken Fry. At the same time of this trip, Hobie was just coming out with his first line of wood-laminated skateboards with clay wheels. We had a bunch of them with us and decided to make our entry into the Chicken Fry by skateboarding down a little hill from where we parked the Big Bird, basking in all its glory with a whole stack of surfboards tied on the roof. To say the locals were surprised to see us would be a huge understatement. They were great and gave us all the chicken we could eat. The headline in the local paper the next day read, "Hawaiian Surf Riders Invade Hagerstown Chicken Fry." It was the first time I felt a little bit of what it was like to be some sort of celebrity. We even signed autographs, another first for me. But that was nothing compared to what was waiting for us along the East Coast. We opened the tour with the first public showing of the movie in New York City, followed by the surfing exhibition the next morning at Gilgo Beach. I was in shock when we pulled up and there were thousands of people waiting to see us. The surf was tiny, but it was a beautiful day. Hobie parked the Big Bird at the top of the beach, and Bruce got on the roof with the PA system he used for the movie and did running color commentary as we attempted to ride what waves that dared to roll in. The biggest problem was that the crowd was so big that people waded out into the water to get a closer view. Some were actually standing right next to us as we were sitting on our boards waiting for waves, and others were standing directly in the way, more or less a hazard in the event we did catch a wave. Bruce had to try and keep them far enough away from us so we could surf, but it was a constant problem to keep them back, and we almost ran down dozens of happy onlookers armed with cameras and white zinc oxide painted noses. It was a pretty amazing morning. Bruce was happy, as the movie was a sellout and got rave reviews. Hobie was happy as thousands of new surfers were born and running out to buy new Hobie boards from the newly set up Hobie dealer there. As surfing was so new, the Hobie dealer was actually a ski shop in Queens, which semi-converted to surfboards for spring and summer, and then back to skis for fall and winter. Also, while in New York, I did an appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I was billed as the United States Junior Surfing Champion who was going to demonstrate the new craze of skateboarding. Hobie and his wife took me out and bought me a suit and a nice pair of shoes to wear on the show, which I thought was totally stupid as I was what I was, a surfer doing some skateboarding. I would have been fine with shorts, t-shirt, and barefoot. But they insisted that I should look good. I'm like, that was going to do it? When I got to the show for rehearsal and they asked me to show them what I was going to do, I found that the stage was extremely slippery. Just trying a simple turn, I spun out and sent my board flying into the waiting audience who had already been seated. Nailed some poor dude in the third row right in the head, and they had to take him out for medical assistance. So, for the actual show, they put some sticky rosin down on the floor, which made it all gooey. After the spectator creaming and rehearsal, Johnny had decided not to give it a try like had been planned, and I decided not to try anything that might end in an embarrassing disaster. So my big demonstration consisted of a couple of turns back and forth, and that was it. I made it a point to say that this was the all-new Hobie skateboard, not hobby, and I even spelled it out. This made Hobie extremely happy, and he told me later that I was becoming worth every penny he was paying me. I suggested he added a few pennies to that, but he just laughed and said, "Keep it up and we will see." The midway spot on the tour was Virginia Beach. The Hobie surfboard dealer there was an already established surf shop called Smith & Holland. It was named after the owners, Pete Smith and Bob Holland. This was the first time in weeks that we didn't have to sleep in the Big Bird. We were split up between Pete and Bob's houses. Mike Hinson and I were put up at Pete Smith's while the rest of the crew stayed with Bob Holland, who had a big, beautiful home a mile or so north of town. As had to happen, the first night Mike and I went cruising the local hotspots and wound up meeting a couple of local chicks. Mike took us back to Pete's house, and I got the bright idea to take mine to the Big Bird. After all, it was empty and available. Mike bought us a six-pack, and we walked up there about 11 o'clock in the evening. Small problem was the door was locked when we got there. So I went around and found that the window on the driver's side was open. I got the chick to boost me up so I could crawl through the window and unlock the door. There were versions of an extremely fun-filled night frolicking through my head, but somehow I got stuck and sort of fell right onto the horn. It started blaring out and I couldn't seem to get myself free. What I didn't know was that there wasn't enough bedrooms in Bob's house for everybody, so Bruce and his wife Pat had decided to sleep in the Big Bird so they could be by themselves. First time they had any privacy on the whole trip, and I guess they had just got to bed when I got stuck on the horn. All the lights in the house came on and Bruce came out of the back in a rage. He pulled me off the horn, opened the door, and punched me in the face as he tossed me out into a mud puddle. It had just started to rain. The last I saw my chick, she was running down the street with our six-pack. That was the end of my fun night and the beginning of a long, long walk back to Pete's house in the rain. The next day we had our exhibition, and I showed up with a big black eye. Hobie took me aside and suggested that I just forget about it and not say anything to anybody about what had happened. I took his advice and just said my board hit me. Bruce never said a word. In fact, he didn't really talk to me much at all after that. I did notice that his narration of my El Rolo in the movie started to take on a sort of a sarcastic tone instead of the previous good-natured delivery that had been funny. Hey, it wasn't like I knew they were in there. I thought they were in the house and we would have the Big Bird all to ourselves. Simple mistake, but it kind of put an edge on what had been a nice friendship, and I've had to live with this now sarcastic comment in the film ever since. Oh well, I wasn't going to let this affect the great time I was having on this trip, nor the fact that I was just happy to be a part of the whole thing. We ended the tour in Florida. While there, I met Gary Proper for the first time. Gary was my age, and he was the hottest surfer on the East Coast. He came to surf with us one day, and all of us were blown away at how well he could ride the waves that were so small that we hardly even considered them rideable at all. He was a very animated and outgoing dude, and I liked him right away. Hope he could see what great marketability he would have on the East Coast, and I think arrangements were being made to bring him into the Hobie fold sooner or later. Finally, we returned to Dana Point, and I was able to actually get my real summer vacation underway. Unfortunately, or fortunately, as it might have been, my dad had crashed my car while I was gone. My dad was always a hard drinker and a heavy party dude. Evidently, he was at the Chart House in Newport Beach one night, and somehow my car got totaled. The upside was that he replaced it with a 1957 Chevy Bel Air station wagon. This was a much better surfmobile and more. I decked the thing out with curtains in the back, a mattress so I could sleep in it during surf trips up and down the coast, and very cool vibrasonic radio speakers to take the cool factor to another level. The combination of Bonsai Betty, that car, and me led to many extremely great adventures that year. Another thing that happened during that summer was the beginning of my work with the Janssen International Sports Club. This was a small collection of guys from different sports that Janssen had put together to use in the advertising for their men's line. It included basketball players Jerry West and Bob Cousy, football players Don Meredith, Frank Gifford, Timmy Brown, Lance Allworth, and Paul Horning, a golf dude named Dave Marr, and hockey star Bobby Hull. Don Meredith and I became pals right off the bat. What a funny and cool dude. He was deep into country music and loved Willie Nelson. The fact that I knew that the country radio station in Los Angeles was KFOX told him that I was okay. During photo shoots, I always hung out with Don and had some great times. I also became friends with Lakers star Jerry West. At the time, I knew a little bit about pro basketball, but I can't say that I was all that deep into it. Jerry invited me to a game, and I got to sit with his wife a few rows behind the Lakers bench. Wow, that did it. I got totally hooked, and to this day, I'm a die-hard purple and gold bleeding Lakers fan. And in fact, write for one of the Lakers fan pages online. I am in heaven when they're winning, and in agony when they aren't. In the off-season, I follow all their trades and draft moves, and everything else avidly. During the season, I watch every game that I can that comes on television. Lakers are my team. I'll never forget the morning that we found out Magic Johnson was going to have to retire due to having HIV. We were doing a cruise for Miller Lite, more on that later, and we just docked in Antigua. I was walking down the hall on my way to the deck, and somebody's radio was on in a cabin, and we heard something about President Bush and Magic Johnson and somebody had AIDS. First thing out of my mouth was, "Oh God, I sure hope it's Bush." This was obviously not because I wished any harm on the president. I just didn't want it to be Magic. I love that dude. He's my all-time idol. When he would come screaming down the court with that huge Cheshire cat smile on his face and have James Worthy on his left and Michael Cooper on his right, you just knew it was lights out, one way or the other. The only question was just what unreal play was he going to make? But for sure, he was going to make one. I loved the Showtime Lakers era and would later do work with Worthy, Byron Scott, and Cooper, all at charity tennis events. Again, more on that later on. Bobby Hull was another story. He was one of those dudes who have to prove to you how strong he is by breaking your hand when you meet him and go to do the handshake. He hurt me so badly that day we met that I never liked him a bit after that. He just always came off as a real mean and arrogant jerk in my eyes. I never have like dudes who have to do that bone-breaking handshaking thing, so probably I just didn't want to like him after that. I thought his kids were punks too. The Janssen connection was great for me and lasted until I retired from pro competition at the end of 1972. I think I was featured on the back cover of Surfer magazine for something like 6 or 7 straight years. The head of the men's division was a super cool dude named Roger Yost. We are still in touch and remain pals to this day. I haven't seen either Don or Jerry in a number of years, Although I did see Jerry at a Lakers game I went to with Jack Haley when his son was playing for the team during the 90s. I really wish Jerry was still working with the Lakers. The dude is a basketball genius. There was a guy who lived down the street from us in Dana Point named Tinker. He lived in a small pink house with John Severson's younger brother, Joey, and they had a goat. The idea was that they would not have to mow the lawn. Tinker was an interesting dude who seemed to be able to fix or make anything, hence the name Tinker. His real name was Carl West, but nobody knew that. He was a glasser for Wardy Surfboards in Laguna Beach and drove this giant old panel truck, sometimes off-roading behind Dana Point in the hills on what he called jungle cruises. I mistakenly went on one of those, and up until that point in my life was the most scared I had ever been. Tinker was also a musician. He used to sit around his living room playing and singing Bob Dylan songs on acoustic guitar and with a harmonica on a rack. Listening to him sort of gave me the inspiration to maybe actually learn how to play an acoustic guitar. I would grab Joey's guitar and try to play along, and that led me to try and learn some songs. But it would still be a little while before I fully committed to it. When the summer of 1964 finally ended, I moved back with my parents in Surfside so I could keep going to Huntington Beach High School. It was the beginning of my senior year. Actually, at that time, we were using the campus of the newly built Marina High, as they were remodeling Huntington Beach High School. But our class would graduate as Huntington Beach High School Class of 1965. I never really got into the social scene at school due to the fact that most of my social activities took place in South County. I would head down there after school on Fridays and spend the weekends there, and return Sunday night to be ready for school on Mondays. In December, I would make the trip back to the North Shore and also surf in the Big Makaha International Championship. This was the year that my dad decided that he wanted to go Hawaiian. Why? I don't know, but he did, and it was pretty strange for me. It was not that I didn't want him along, but the fact that he was such a high-volume drinker and outrageous partier made it kind of awkward on me. Mike Doyle and I went to the airport in Honolulu to pick him up the day he arrived, and he was already totally wasted when he got off the plane. He made his Hawaiian debut by falling down the stairs getting off the plane, jumping to his feet and grabbing the pilot by the hand and slobbering out, "Great driving, pal." When the chick was trying to put a lei around his neck, I think he tried to hump her leg or something. All I know is she jumped back and screamed. This led the security guys to guide him off the runway and make us promise to get him out of there immediately and sober him up. We got him out of there okay, but he didn't sober up for the whole 2 weeks he was there. Sometimes he was really funny. Other times I was totally embarrassed by the things he would do or say. He seemed to be having the time of his life nonetheless, and I couldn't really fault him for that. He worked hard, and he and my mom didn't get along very well at all. He would come home half in the bag and my mom would get really pissed off about it and rag him so bad that he would stomp off to bed. They had separate rooms. This was pretty much a nightly thing. So I guess this trip was some kind of release for him and he took full advantage of it just to let go and rage, which he did in full glory and living color. I had always been close with both my parents even when they were fighting. This trip to Hawaii more or less began a slow decline in how close I was with my dad, though. Even though I was glad he was having a good time, it was still hard to be around him, or anybody for that matter, when he was fully drunk to the max all the time. He would get up and have a couple of martinis and wash them down with a beer just to get himself going. I started sneaking off to surf when he wasn't paying attention just so I could be away from him for a while. I began to fully understand what my mom was dealing with and why she got so angry with him all the time. Fun is fun, but this was kind of ugly. Oh well, it just was what it was. We were all staying in a house out by Velzeland that surf movie maker Dale Davis had rented. I really liked Dale a lot. Mike and I did a lot of surfing together for Dale's upcoming movie, and I think it was really that winter that I came to fully appreciate the amazing surf skills that Mike had in big surf, and just how far ahead of most anybody else he was in massive conditions. I would see him make free-falling late takeoffs at Waimea Bay on giant days when I was in fear for my life and being as ultra careful as possible. He would pull big bottom turns and get really deep. I don't think the published versions of surfing history gave Mike the credit he truly deserves as one of the greatest surfers of all time he truly was. One last note on 1964 is that it was the year I learned the hard way about the media. I was asked to do an interview for Surf Guide magazine, and I was very excited about it. This took place early in the year before the endless summer trip. They sent a guy named Bill Clary down to our house in Surfside to interview me. I didn't know him, and he didn't know me, but I guess he had some sort of preconceived ideas about me. I had no idea what to say, and honestly, he had no idea what to ask me. He pretty much only did the basic stuff like, who influenced you the most, and that was about it. He said he had all he needed and would put a great story together. He also said he would send it to me for my approval before it went to print. Well, neither of those ever happened. The story came out headlined as Corky the Clown. He made up pretty much the whole thing and only used some of what I had said, mostly twisting words to sound the way he wanted them to sound. The clown part didn't really bother me so much, as I've always had a sense of humor and liked to joke and clown around. Unfortunately for me, during my life, many people either did not get the joke or understand that I was actually trying to be funny, and they took it seriously. Well, anyways, this dude definitely put a weird slant on the story, and I felt it was pretty embarrassing. I talked to Hobie about it, and his take was that anybody who knew me would be fine with it, but in the future, I'd better be more careful with the press. Obviously, I did not learn that lesson right off the bat and went on to make many such blunders as time went on. My attitude was, well, if they can't take a joke. That attitude got in the way of probably many friendships that I never got to have. I thought I was totally cool, but there were many who totally didn't. It was about that time when I started hanging out with a really good surfer from Laguna Beach that was my age, Billy Hamilton. Billy and I had sort of opposite directions on how we were developing our surfing skills. He was super smooth and spent hours looking at photos of guys like Skip Fry and Phil Edwards to make sure he knew exactly how to place his hands and even his fingers. At first, he didn't have any really big moves, but he looked amazing doing what he did have. I was still more all over the place as far as having perfect hand and finger placement went. Eventually, both of us would round into complete surfers. But at first, we were just two gremmies who were stoked to the max and lived and breathed surfing. We went to a lot of the contests together, sometimes with Mark Martinson along too. Plus, we surfed together at Cotton's Point, Trestles, Salt Creek, and Doheny all the time. I remember one time we drove up to Santa Barbara to surf the Hollister Ranch. We had no way to get in, so we decided to walk. One day we walked in from the north, probably 6 miles each way. The next we walked in from the south, calling it 3 or 4 miles each way. Both days the surf was tiny and the walk was totally miserable each way, but we didn't care at all. It was an adventure. Billy has always been one of my favorite people in surfing and a guy who I respect as one of the greatest surfers I've ever seen. He certainly has the best style that I know of. His stepson is the famous big wave waterman, Laird Hamilton. Well, that is going to do it for Chapter 7, The Summer of the Endless Summer, from Corky Carroll's autobiography, Not Done Yet. Thanks again for hanging out with me here at the Surfers Library. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with a friend. And come back next time as we continue our journey through Not Done Yet. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/The Surfers Library. Your support helps cover the platform fees that help keep the show going each month. Also, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast or have any story ideas or feedback for the podcast, please contact us on Instagram or by email at thesurferslibrary@gmail.com. Until then, this is Billy Jack reminding you to keep your toes on the nose, your stoke high, and always, always, always support your local surf shop. I'll see you out in the lineup.